I'll start with a quick review for this book, Rationality by Steven Pinker. What it is, why it seems scarce, why it matters. Definitely some good information, as usual. Pinker has a lot of information, packs with information, a lot of studies, and different points of data. However, I didn't think he's doing always. Some part is better than others, but I don't think he's always doing a good job of transferring ideas to the readers. Some parts were heavily convoluted and not well explained. It is a long read, not very long, but it's a longer read. So I think you should make it shorter somehow, but expand a little more about certain things, or make it shorter, make it longer overall. Even though I thought some parts could definitely be reduced. So, but definitely some of the parts, especially the math, there's a lot of, not a lot of math, but there is some math parts he definitely didn't do enough. So either drop the math or explain more about it. That's the way I see it. Overall, it's a 3 out of 5. A high 3. I would give it a high 3, not a regular 3. Almost a 4, but not exactly a 4 because of everything I just mentioned. Let's see the notes. Even with all the biases, humans still achieve a lot. So there's a long list of cognitive biases, but humans still achieve a lot. You need to not forget that part. People can solve problems much better given the right environment and or appropriation. So we can solve better problems, especially math problems, much better if we're giving the right environment or appropriation. It's all about how do you or how do we pose the question. The exponential growth bias is the failing to understand how fast some events can grow. That's the exponential growth. We don't understand how fast things can grow. We don't see how, like the pandemic, gives the idea of the pandemic. We don't understand how exactly exponential growth goes. Using real life examples makes people more likely to answer problems than arbitrary rules. So that's similar to the idea that we spoke here. Using real life example is much better, and people can solve problems much easier than if we give them arbitrary rules, X and Y's and things like that. We should switch out choice giving to the opportunity because it's a clue that has been given to us. So that's regarding we should switch out the choice given to us. And Monty Hole, I think the Monty Hole problems they call it. They have 3 options. You choose one, it's not that, and then the person who does the study or the game asks you if you want to change. So the idea is that we should change even though it's counterintuitive. Why we should change? Because the fact that they asked us that means that they give us a clue that maybe you should change your thing. It doesn't work exactly like that. They open one door, it says it's not there. Do you want to change your choice? Sorry, that's how it works. The conjunction fallacy is assigning a higher probability of 2 events to take place versus 1 event. So that's a conjunction fallacy. 2 events to happen cannot, the probability of 2 events to take place cannot be higher than 1. Reason always rely on other reasons and so on. So that's a problem. Not some of them, but it's a problem of reason that it always rely on other reasons in turn. Saying that everything is relative, is that statement relative too? It's an interesting philosophical question. Pinker could be philosophical at times, but is that relative too? Holding on rewards in order to get a bigger one in the future depends on the size of the reward and how long is the wait. So that's the marshmallow thing. How long should you wait for a bigger return in the future. He says that the way to solve it, or the way to think about it right, is to think of how big is the reward and how long is the wait. Politicians tend to discount the future, leaving a mess for whoever comes after. They discount the future. They think about short term, and then whoever comes after is in a mess. In negotiations, those who have their hands tied often win because they would not budge, therefore they could win. The madman strategy is making threats, making the other side lose face. That's the madman. Some use it. I think they said that Trump used it a little bit. North Korea, Kim Jong-un is using it too. Is by acting crazy, you make the other side lose face. Ought is not is. There's a difference between ought to be and is. Not the same thing. We can reason about rationality. So that's one thing we can do, is reason about it. That's why rationality matters. There's a popular saying in Yiddish, if my grandmother had balls, she would be my grandfather. That's funny. And important too. Saying that if, that's the ifs problems. Affirming the consequent does not affirm the antecedent. So if we affirm the if then, if we affirm the then, we cannot, it does not affirm the if. Attacking the person rather than the argument is becoming more popular even among academics. So that's the problem of attacking the person. It has a name even. Ad hominem, I think, something like that. Factual knowledge could contradict logic. It's not always goes in tandem. Real life situations cannot always be represented with logic since it's more nuanced. So they use logic, they have symbolic logic, but it's very limited to a real life situation because it's much more complicated than what we can present or represent in logic. Neural networks could be astonishingly stupid and complex. They don't understand very simple things, and they could be really complex. We often substitute probability with availability. Best example is driving and flying, where no one is afraid of driving, even while it's much more dangerous than flying. That's the differences between probability to availability. We think about availability, what we heard, or how crazy it sounds. Probability conjunctions should be multiplied when occurrences are not dependent. So that's how we calculate probability conjunction. So if it's independent, it's not independent, we multiply them. Statistics that show boys are more likely to get injured bicycling could be mistaken for them being more reckless, all while it could be a result of a more avid lifestyle. So there is a statistics that show that boys tend to get more injured in comparison to girls, but that could be mistaken. People who see that could think that boys are more reckless, even though it just could be that they're more avid lifestyles. They're just doing it more. That doesn't mean recklessness. A man who brings a bomb with him on the plane is having a low chance of having two of them. He's changing the probability by bringing one of his own. So that's the problem of, and it's funny too that it's a joke, I think, that a person bring a bomb with him on the plane because he said, what's the probability of having two? There's a very low probability of having two bombs on the plane, so I'll bring them one. But the thing is, it's wrong thinking because he changes the probability because he brings one of his own and he's going through the math in there. According to the author, the probability of 57 people having same birthday is 99%. I read that and I was like, what? Doesn't sound right, but maybe. When computing probabilities, we need to take into account the availability of the chance of such occurrences taking place in the first place. So we have to think about what is the chances of that event taking place in the first place when we compute probabilities. People are not risk averse, they are loss averse, which can be seen with winning versus losing money. So there's a notion that we are risk averse, but he says that it's not much that we're risk averse, we are loss averse. We don't want to lose money, but we're willing to risk money. Playing around with the response criterion can increase or decrease the false alarm and correct rejection proportions. So that's the response criterion, is how nuanced or how anal basically we are with checking the situation, and that can increase and decrease, or decrease, depends on where we go, the false alarm and correct rejection rate. Correct rejection is that we say it's not an enemy plane, for example. False alarm is that we failed, we think it is, and it's not. A great example of regression to the mean is criticism, where people might think it's working while it's just regression. That's a great example of regression to the mean. People criticize, think it works, even though it could just be regression. Coffee was associated with heart disease until they found out that coffee drinkers tend to smoke and avoid exercise. So at first it was because they found correlation between coffee and heart disease, but only then they found out that there is a confound that is that coffee drinkers tend to smoke and avoid exercise, which can cause heart disease. Causation is an elusive concept. A fire could be caused by a spark or by oxygen. So which one? That's a problem of causation. Because it could be, so what is causing the fire? Oxygen or the spark? And then they're saying, what if it's both? You can say both. Causation is both. I don't know. Next one is only counterfactuals can prove causation, which can be imitated by randomized control trials. The only way to prove causation is by counterfactuals. We try other things. If we don't do that, what happened? And that's going to be imitated by randomized control trials, in which we don't know who took what, and that's what can prove causation. And the last one, people accept or dispute a study based on whether it fits their own narrative. So that's one of the problems we have today. People can either accept that, they have a lot of studies about it. It's funny, if you have studies about people accepting or rejecting studies, but if it doesn't fit the data, they would reject it, citing all kinds of issues. But if it fits their data, they would like it, regardless. They're going to do the same on a different study. So that's it for the notes. Again, there is some interesting information, especially if you like Pinker's books, but I felt like he failed to properly transfer some of that information he tried to the readers, at least for me. You might like it, but I think especially the math parts, I think you should either drop it or explain it more. You have to go either way. It can be in the middle. But that's it for the notes. Thank you.